Mark, for anyone that doesn't know you, who are you and what do you do?
So Mark Jackson, I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Vitaspan.
And how did you enter healthcare?
It was actually a journey which was full of surprises. So I entered healthcare when I was in New York. I just left a very large corporation, Thomson Reuters, which I'd worked for 20 years. And I was figuring out what to do next. And I was being very, very deliberate about that decision. I wanted to make sure that I'd spend the next phase of my career doing something exceedingly meaningful, having a big impact, but also having a lot of fun. I didn't want to be in an industry or surrounded by people that weren't energizing me and giving me stuff back. And I'd had a health event in 2012, which was quite considerable. It was an autoimmune issue, which uncovered, which I'll come on to later in the discussion, but it sort of unearthed a real passion in me for healthcare because I cured myself of something which most people have said was incurable. And so I'd always had this sort of, since that point, a real interest in the space. And if I thought that there was an opportunity to move into it in 2012, I would have jumped in with both hands and feet. But it didn't. It took a lot longer, and it wasn't until I left Thomson Reuters. And what basically happened was I went for dinner. I sat at a bar in a restaurant on the Upper West Side in New York and ordered a lovely steak, sat down, eating, keeping myself to myself, and a guy sat down next to me. And we got talking, and he was about 65 years old. And in the short space of this discussion, which only lasted about 20 minutes, I'd finished and left, almost finished my meal and then left. But in those 20 minutes, I'd talked about the fact that I'd left a big corporate. I'm trying to figure out what to do next. And he said to me, I did exactly the same thing as you. I was about 10 years older. And if you want any advice, you want to talk, here's my number. Just give me a shout and let's have a discussion and I might be able to be of use to you. And I took him up on that offer. And then over the next about 4 weeks, we met for lunch, met for a dinner, and I talked about my aspirations, my background, the things that I'd done, that really also a lot to do with my sort of core beliefs and what really drove me, my values, if you like. And at the end of the 4 weeks, which actually was super helpful for me because it coincided with my severance pay finishing.
That's perfect.
He offered me a job.
Wow.
And I was like, wow, this is not what I expected. So I asked, this is doing what? And he said, I run a private investment company, and we're involved in investments in improving human health across a range of spectrums. It could be SaaS, it could be drug discovery, it could be medical device, etc. And he said, look, I've just bought 3 companies, or recently bought 3 companies, a hardware business, a software business, and a distribution business. I've put them all together, hoping that it will take off because it's all sort of interlinked and aligned. It was a bit of a roll-up strategy in a particular segment of healthcare. And very regrettably, everything was going south. The financials were not working. There wasn't a culture. 3 founders couldn't get along, and it was just a disaster. So he told me the field, and he said it's electroencephalograms. And I thought, what on earth is that? I've never been involved in that business before. And he said it's EEGs, so the brainwaves, so neurodiagnostics. And he said, look, what we're really trying to do is develop a SaaS business to go alongside the hardware business that we have. But I need somebody to come in and really bring it all together. And in my period of trying to figure out what to do next, I'd centered on some sort of core principles that were really important to me. One, that I wanted to be a CEO. 2, I wanted to work in a sector that actually did good. Neutral would have been okay, but good was best, and certainly didn't do harm. And then the final principle was that I wanted to work with an organisation that had a very progressive culture, or allowed me to create one. And so with this opportunity, he said, look, I can't give you the CEO role because there are 3 founders, and if I parachute you in, it's going to cause even more chaos and be very political and very difficult. But he said there's a pathway And I promise you that if you do a good job, within 2 years, you can get that role. And I thought to myself, look, it's not quite what I wanted. And asked what role it was. He said, it's a VP of sales. I'm thinking, blimey, I'm a VP of sales. That's quite a lot lower than I expected. And then he hit me with another whammy, which basically said, and your salary is going to be this, which was considerably lower than what I had before. And I'm thinking to myself, well, where's the upside in this? And he said, look, I will give you 10% of the upside that you generate on the day that you join the company to the point at which we sell it. So I thought to myself, look, I back myself. I've had lots of experience in big corporate. I've learned good things and bad things and been, in multiple countries. I know that I can make this work and I know that I can become a CEO and bring it all together. And I signed on the dotted line and became a CEO of a health tech company, FDA regulated med tech, operating in both the US and the UK. And yeah, I guess the rest is history.
And so what happened after that? I assume that then, under your, considering you speak of it, it grew quite a lot whilst you were CEO and leading it.
Yeah, so what I didn't know is that when I joined in December of 2019, a few months later, the world was going to completely change and everything was going to be different. Yeah. So I came in with a sort of a plan of how to do things and how to turn things around and move this company forward. And unfortunately, the world changed. We were then all sort of trying to react to the events, lockdowns and infections and et cetera, et cetera. And I had to sort of start again. And my view was very, very simple, which was ultimately the people in the business, there was 80 of us, 70, 80 of us in total. These people are the experts in the field that they operate. What I've got to do is give them the confidence and the belief to do it. And the sort of like the aspiration or the goal was to double the revenue of the company and move everything forward. And with that goal, I then effectively said to each one of the department heads that reported to me, what is it that you need to do in order to help us get to this point, basically? And I'm very proud of this work because effectively it was them with the answers. I just helped sort of organise it. But effectively what we did was we looked at each one of the levers in their respective areas that they could pull, what it would cost to do that, how much friction was involved in the adoption of the change, how long it would take, and ultimately what the impact would be. And that helped us sort of grade all of the ideas. Everyone was coming up with like 10, 15 ideas for their respective areas, but it became very quick to refine that and get down to a subset that we could actually decide upon, because these scorings, these rankings gave us the answer. And then once we did that, it's right, then give people the permission to go and make the change and make it happen. Most of it, to be honest, was about reducing friction, getting rid of complexity. If you get sort of on a trodden path, a well-trodden path, sometimes it's very difficult to sort of reverse back or look outside at the problem and then make some changes. And I guess I was the guy who didn't know a huge amount, asked dumb questions, and then gave people the confidence and the authority to then go and make things happen.
And so how did you know, if you're coming into this and you haven't been in the healthcare industry before, how did you actually know what levers to pull? How did you know that this was the strategy that was going to work to grow the company?
A lot to do with commercial go-to-market. That ultimately that was my job when I first joined in the first sort of period. It was VP of sales. So I've got the GTM levers. So really, when you look at it, they had a great set of products. So they had the best amplifier on the market, which basically allowed you to take the EEG signals, put it into this amplifier. The amplifier would then beam that data or send that data to a laptop, which would send it to the cloud, and the neurologist could then remote in. So the fidelity and the accuracy of this amplifier that was directly connected to the electrodes from somebody's head was really, really powerful, and it was very, very accurate. So they had all of the tools, but what the mistakes they made were effectively, I guess, being a little bit too geeky, talking about all the widgets and the things and giving people a million different options when it came to actually buying the thing, and forgetting that actually people don't really want to know all the intricacies of every little lever and switch and all the rest of it. What they want to do is make sure that a patient has an EEG in their home and it works and it runs smoothly. They didn't want to spend time and effort trying to decipher our complexity, decide what configuration they needed, buy it, which was fraught with lots of complexity as well, because our contracts were awful, our invoicing was terrible, even our proposals were complicated. So basically we just eradicated all the mess and the noise and just, right, if somebody wants to do an EEG for a patient at home, just make it as simple as possible to do that. And let's use our knowledge to determine the configuration that they need. Let's figure out the price point. Let's make a simple proposal and let's make contracting for that really simple. And then the final part was, well, if we bill somebody for it, well, shouldn't the bill match up with the service they're seeing so that the accounts department doesn't go, whoa, what on earth is this? How do I decipher what this is relative to what we actually used? And that friction, if you think about it, it exists still to this day in a lot of companies that you interact with, you deal with. You just go, what? Why? Why does it have to? So I sort of gave people permission to just change all of that, simplify it, and guess what? People bought more quickly, our velocity improved, and we did a lot better.
And what would you say are the main skills that equipped you to be able to actually take over and grow this company so much?
Probably the work that I did with Thomson Reuters and the journey. So I didn't, the way that I learn is by experiencing. It's sort of getting involved and doing stuff. So I'm not one for sort of reading a textbook and then internalizing it and then applying it. I've got to feel it. It's got to be visceral and real. So I started my journey at Thomson Reuters right at the coalface. I was a new business salesperson selling data and information to hedge funds in London, which is a pretty unforgiving market. People don't want to give you a huge amount of time. They want to buy the thing, make a trade on the market and move on. They're not really interested in much else. And so I learned a ton doing that. I learned a huge amount about the sales process, about what to do, how to do it, how to sort of provide maximum value in a short space of time and get rid of friction. And
just going on to that one, what are the main things there? What are the main, if you could just generalize, what are the key concepts that you learn about how to do that?
Knowing your audience is key. So back at that time, so this was 99, if you wanted a meeting with somebody, you had to pick the phone up and book a meeting. You had to do a cold call. And so if I'm trying to cold call a hedge fund manager, it was probably the worst or hardest cold call that you can make, because I'm distracting somebody from the job of making money by calling them up. So I had to think really, really carefully about how do I get their attention and ultimately make a sale. And it's understanding that on the call, you're not making a sale. All you're doing is actually booking a meeting. That's it. So understanding like a sales process is really, really important, but breaking it down into the component parts and then thinking about the first stage in that sales process. Well, how do you get to the second stage? And that's it. Focus on getting to the second stage. When you're at the second stage, get to the third stage. If it's 5 stages, moving along, rather than the mistake is one opportunity, try and sell the thing in the first opportunity. You'll screw it all up.
And so how does it, what is your mental process when, for example, you are at that stage and you're just trying to get someone on the call? What's the process that goes through?
Well, back then, the world's different now, so I should just clarify. The world is very different. Back then, my focus was, if I want to book a meeting, I want to be very, very, very direct, which is the reason. I literally pick the phone up and say, the reason I've called you is to book a meeting. And they go, about what? And then that gives me my in. If they say immediately, I'm not interested, it was okay, phone down. But if I say, I've called you to book a meeting, 8 times, 7 times, I'd say, about what? And then that gives me literally about 20 seconds to say what, deliver the value, which I've already figured out. I've spent time thinking about, well, what's the value that my solution delivers to you to do your job more effectively? Put the phone down once I've secured the time and move on. So it's about trying to prep before every interaction, and really, 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 really thinking about how do I get from this step to that step as quickly as possible, and not trying to sort of use it as a tool to try and jump from stage 1 to stage 5, because you're not going to make it. It's not going to happen.
Quick break from the show. If you are a healthcare business and you're looking for new video assets, whether that be sales assets or social media content or commercials, that is exactly what we specialize in at Talking Pulse. Shoot us an email at dasha@talkingpulse.com or follow us on LinkedIn at Dasha Angelova or Martini Sue, and we can help you out with that. And so you mentioned a lot of the other skills that you learned at the larger corporations that you worked at really helped you when you joined this health tech company. What else from there did you?
Yeah, well, when I became the CEO, the big sort of takeaway from it, or the aha really, was communication is absolutely critical. Communication is the thing that destroys companies in a heartbeat, because people assume, i.e. if you're higher up in the organisation, if you assume that people on the ground know what you're thinking, and because you've said it once, or it's on a few posters, or you've communicated it in a town hall, you're deluded, because people have got so many things they're focused on. You've got to repeat and repeat and repeat and repeat until the point of which you sound like you're being very boring, because you have to drive it home. The communication channels are really, really critical. But the other piece of it is the incentives. So in all organisations, incentives are important, but in big companies, incentives are the things that either maximise value or completely destroy and erode it. And what I mean by that is, in larger organisations, you tend to have more complexity in your go-to-market. So you have different sales groups responsible for different things. So it might, if you're a big corporate, you've probably got a product portfolio. It's not just one point solution, it's a range of stuff. And what I found in the large corporate that I worked for, the challenge was when you've got individual point solution salespeople selling their thing to the detriment of the overall value that the organisation's trying to provide, unless you've got everybody lined up to get to extract maximum value from selling a portfolio solution. If the CEO wants you to sell the portfolio solution, but you've got salespeople aligned to selling point solutions, it's never going to work. No matter what you do, what you say, people will do the thing that they've been incentivized to go and do. So you've got to have a really, really joined up incentive strategy across the entire organization and match that to the values, goals, mission of the company. And if you get that piece wrong, you're completely screwed. And the thing for me, the frustration that I had working, the company I worked for had 55,000 people in offices all around the world. And I was always motivated by doing the right thing by the corporation, because I knew that longer term that would be good for me, because it would do better and pay me more and all the rest of it. But it wasn't. I wasn't always just driven by the cash in my pocket from the direct thing. But most people were. Yeah. And I used to get quite frustrated when people were sort of misaligned. They weren't thinking about the greater good of the organisation. But in retrospect, it was ridiculous to think that they would, because they're incentivized, measured against something completely different. So as much as I wanted them to do something else, the fact that they were rewarded and actually measured against something different, how could you expect them to behave any differently?
And so how did you know when you were when you were entering this company, how did you know that you wanted the CEO role? How did you know you wanted to be a leader?
That I knew before I entered. So that was one of the sort of the core pillars for me selecting the job, is it has to be a CEO role. And the reason being is that I'd felt that over 20 years working in London, then opening a Middle East office, and then working in New York for 11 years, I'd seen a lot. I'd seen a lot of very good things, and I'd seen things which were sort of not working as they should. And I knew that culture was absolutely critical. But if you're a head of sales, you can't really impact culture across the entire organisation. You might be able to impact it for your sort of go-to-market function, but you can't do it across product, you can't do it across tech, you can't do it across all the other aspects. And so I had a really strong passion and belief that, look, if I can only get hold of an organisation in its entirety and shape its culture, then I can do incredible things. And I really, really back myself to do it. But the only way to have the authority or the backing to do it is become the CEO.
And when do you think culture starts mattering? Because I think we see a lot of startups or early stage companies that kind of just try to grow. They don't really care about culture that much because it doesn't seem like the most important thing. The most important thing is just revenue. So when does that topic of culture actually come up as important?
I think it's, to me personally, it's critical day one. It has to be the thing that, and it might not manifest itself in a whole load of rules and sort of, written sort of tenets, etc., but the way in which I conduct myself, the way in which I communicate, the way in which I talk about what we're doing and talk about our customers, talk about partners, etc., that's the culture. And then so if I bring someone in to my organization and they've got, maybe a different philosophy around some of those core things, it's not going to work. Because, if you're a 1-person startup, a 10-person startup, a 15-person startup, every single one of those employees is a representation of your company. And if the culture is not right, i.e. the vision, values, belief, etc., it's going to destroy your organization. So I would say it's critical day one, absolutely critical.
And what were the things that over your time when you were working in these larger corporations, what was the things that you saw that made you so certain that culture was such a significant moving thing that moved the needle?
Because it impacted motivation so much, really. That was the real sort of aha moment for me. I mean, if you think about it, if you go into a workplace and a work environment, let's say you've got a really healthy sort of foundational program that gets you ready for the morning, whatever it may be, cold showers and, maybe you go for a jog, maybe you do meditation, whatever it is that you do to prepare yourself and you're sort of really sort of full of beans, ready for the day. If you walk through the door, and I was really big on this as well, which if you walk through the door and the atmosphere isn't right, the atmosphere is the way in which the walls are painted, the way in which you're greeted as you walk through, the lighting, like literally everything. If that's not right, it chips away at that sort of foundation that you created for the day. And it might not be massive, but it might diminish it by 5% or 10% or something. And then you walk into the organization and then you have a manager who you don't respect completely. They're sort of, their morals are questionable. They're doing something which you don't disagree with. That chips away again as well. And if you're in sales and you've got difficulty with customers, either ones that you're managing or ones you're trying to sell to, that's difficult. Or you're in accounts and somebody's not paying. Every part of your job, there is friction that diminishes your energy. So if you go into an organization that's not thinking about that exchange of energy and protecting it for you as an employee, then that's going to diminish your ability to perform and execute, etc., etc. So it might seem a bit obsessive and a bit strange to drill into it, but for me, those are the things that make such a powerful difference between the companies that are sort of moving along and just eking along to the one versus the ones that rocket ship, because they do spend that time and attention on the detail. I basically want everyone who works for me to understand that my job as a CEO is to give you a platform to become the best version of yourself possible. And there's a two-way exchange in that. So I need some of that energy for you to be the best, to become the best person, directed towards what I want you to do for the company. But I've also got to be cognizant that you need it to do something else. So if I find out what your something else is, and it might be different from, or even away from my company, but if we're aware of that at the outset, and I know that your aspiration in 2 years, 3 years is to do X, Y, and Z, if I help you get to that point, by giving you skills and tools, etc., and development opportunities that enable that to happen, well, guess what? You're going to work harder. You're going to be more motivated. You're going to break down brick walls because you understand that somebody's really giving a crap about your development, and I think that plays into culture as well. It's all part of it.
I think it's such an interesting point because we, even though we're a very small company, we focus on culture so much and on values as well so much. But I think one of the hardest things for any founder is actually the hiring process. How do you actually hire someone for culture? So how do you build a good team? That's
a really interesting question, particularly for a startup. and particularly for a startup that doesn't pay people, you know, so you've got this, right, I need something done, but I can't pay you to do it. So does that mean I'll just take anybody? Because anybody's willing to do something free, absolutely, let's get them in. But it's not. I think it's really, really important that you understand people's motivation. And if you can find somebody who's willing to do something, even though that there's no immediate tangible benefit, because they see the thing that you're doing is going to be massively valuable, and I'm not talking from an economic perspective, but a societal benefit, and they want to be a part of it, that's almost your qualifier right there. So somebody's willing to do something for free because they see the value that it provides, not to themselves, but to broader society, and they're still willing to do it. That's the person I want to go and talk to. However, if you're a startup and you're paying people, and then you're trying to figure out, well, this person or that person. So this person's got all the skills in the world, this person hasn't. Then it's on character for me. It's about trying to find these individuals that have got capacity and willing.
And how do you discern character?
I think it's by being human, ultimately, by being a human being, you know, having a conversation, you know, understanding, you know, it's very difficult, and I really do understand this from big corporates' perspective. When I hired in a big corporate, it was the most boring thing possible, because you've got to be so careful about what you ask, how you ask it, blah blah blah, because of certain things that you could get taken up of. And particularly I remember this distinctly as a first-time manager, trying to hire people and ask the right questions that would keep me out of the HR department and, you know, also help me hire somebody. Yeah. It was really difficult, because what I really wanted to do is I want to understand your family. Tell me about your background. Where did you go to school? Where did you grow up? What did you do outside that? And what did your mum and dad do, etc.? Because all of those things give me a much broader understanding of who you are as a human being, what motivates you, and I get a sense then of, you know, what makes you tick. And if I can understand that, then I might think, okay, are you a good fit for what we're trying to accomplish? Because the worst thing in the world for the individual ultimately as well is if I brought you in and you weren't a good fit culturally for us, then there would be friction, because you wouldn't be motivated. I wouldn't be able to motivate you in the right way. I'd steal some of your energy, you get pissed off, and then we create friction, and then you want to leave. It doesn't work. So I think we've all got to be very, very honest on the outset about who we are as human beings and what we want, and that takes a lot of introspection from the person who's applying for a job as well, which can be difficult sometimes, particularly if they're you know, fresh out of university and trying to figure stuff out. But the more that people spend on understanding what it is that they want to do, where they want to get, and the skills that they need to acquire in order to get there, I think the better it is for you then to find a job and hopefully find a manager that can help you on that journey and that pathway.
And what advice do you have for anyone who's coming either newly or has already been in a leadership role, considering everything that you've seen and all the change you've created? What advice would you give?
That you've got to do the work on understanding yourself before you lead anybody else.
What does that mean?
It basically means that if you're not managing yourself properly, how on earth can you manage anybody else? And that means really doing a lot of work to try and make you, the individual, the best version of yourself that you possibly can be. And we go through this in different stages in our life. You know, now I'm 50, so I'm like, I guess, optimizing every single aspect. You know, spiritual, physical, etc., etc. 30-year-old me maybe wasn't doing all of that stuff, but perhaps 50-year-old me, if I'd spoken to 30-year-old me, might have taken that advice on and incorporated it. But I honestly, I really think you've got to do, if you want to lead people, you've got to be able to sort of take a hard look at yourself, look at your flaws, try and correct them, improve, and be an example, basically, for others.
And what does that actually mean physically? Because I think so many times we hear this advice of kind of learn about yourself, get to know yourself. But what does that actually mean? How do you get to know yourself? How do you kind of get onto this journey of starting to learn about yourself?
Yeah, I think that there are sort of pillars or foundations, whatever you want to call it. Like the first foundation, and I didn't do this. In my 20s, I was, growing in a big corporate, going out, and et cetera, et cetera. But the advice that I would have given myself is like the number one foundation is be healthy. Be fit.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure that your physical body is in good condition, because if it's not, then that has a lag on your ability to function properly, and you're always then going to be dealing with some underlying thing that's going to impact you either sooner or later, basically. So I think the foundation is like you've got to get your physical body in a good state. So move, do some movement and don't be static. I think the problem that afflicts the UK more than most areas is alcohol. It's so legitimised and it's so normal to drink and drink to excess, and that's not seen as being weird. It's seen as weird if you don't do it. So 20-year-old me was busy on a Thursday, the new Friday. Everyone's out on a Thursday night. You get a few drinks, and then it'd be expected that you drink on a Friday, then you drink on a Saturday. And a younger version of me could manage with that. But was I the best going back to work on a Monday, or was I a bit, Monday's a bit, I need a few days to recover? Well, I mean, what a strange thing to think about.
Yeah,
when
to
you got
have so normalised in society. Yeah,
but it is. It's like that's the blinking norm. So I think we've got to do something about that and sort of understand that it's a very powerful substance. So when you do it, think about it and do it consciously, and then think about the recovery afterwards, rather than just throwing it down and doing it again and again and again, because it has massive ramifications.
Yeah, I mean, it's also, we had a nutritionist on here who was also saying it's a class 1 carcinogen, which should be a warning label on the bottle, but it's not.
Yeah.
But what were other things that you would say that working on yourself make the biggest difference?
Understanding of cortisol, stress, basically. That was critical for me. So I've sort of mentioned it earlier, but in 2012, my son had just been born. I was about 18 months into this sort of onboarding into a new job in America. So I've moved to New York from the Middle East. So I've gone from the Middle East where I don't pay any tax. I've got a nice big house and swimming pool, all the rest of it. Life is good. We'll go to New York. Everything's hectic. Small apartment, son on the way. The job that took me there is now going south. It's not going as planned, because the product that we'd developed wasn't being received in the market as we wanted it to. So there was huge amounts of infighting in the company. And my sort of relaxation was playing football 3 times a week, but drinking. I was always into organic food. So I was eating fairly healthily, but probably a bit too much sugar. And ultimately what was going on is that I was just surrounded by and producing cortisol, and it was just always there. And it manifested for me in an autoimmune condition, eczema. And sometimes we think of eczema as being a little bit inconvenient, like you've got a dry patch on your hand or your face or whatever. But for me, it's completely debilitating. It was all over my body. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't function. And I didn't want to live anymore. It was that bad. It was so painful. And although in my life I'd always used acupuncture and been aware of Eastern medicine, in New York at that time, I was running a sales team. I was I needed to be front and center. I just needed to get as quickly as possible. So I made the dreadful mistake of going to a dermatologist on Central Park South. And I had literally about 10 to 15 minute consultation. He listened to me, told me that eczema is not curable. The only thing you can do is manage it. Then he disappeared into the back room, came out with a steroid, which he then injected into me, and the eczema went. And I thought, wow, okay, this is great. But 6 weeks later, it roared back with a vengeance, and I was off work. I literally couldn't go to work. It was that bad. And in this sort of desperate state, I prayed. I did pray, and I was thinking about how to get an answer to my problem. And I came across a clinical nutritionist. This individual was presented to me, and I went to see him, and he said, "Look, don't worry." And he was very reassuring. "I've seen this many times before. I think I know what's going on, but we need to do some testing. I don't want to just say it's this and treat you. Let's do some testing." So we did some microplastic blood testing. We did some mold testing, heavy metal detox testing to see what was going on. And then we did some leaky gut testing to figure out whether there was a problem with my gut. Turned out there was. And really what that opened my eyes up to was, Western medicine is very, very, very focused on symptoms. So you go to a doctor, you present yourself, and they say, right, you've got this, and you typically walk out with X to solve that symptom. Yeah. But you don't have this holistic discussion about, well, what caused that? Let's trace back, and let's look at the wider environment that you're in to then determine, what the problem was. And what I've come to realize now is that all the body wants to be in is homeostasis, into balance. It's a beautiful machine, organic machine, designed to be well and function incredibly. And we're surrounded by toxins, both in the environment and things that we're exposed to that we may actually put on ourselves as well, or ingest, that put it out of whack, put it out of balance. And this guy just helped me trace back. And it was remarkable. He basically said, look, you've got leaky gut, so let's go back. The leaky gut's caused by candida overgrowth. So it's a mold, and the roots of this fungus, not mold, the roots of the fungus have permeated through the gut lining, which makes it porous. Yeah. So when you eat food, tiny particles of that food now are going into the blood and causing this autoimmune issue. Wow. And in my case, that was manifesting in eczema. He said, like others, it can be migraines. In others, it can be, brain fogs. It can be rheumatoid arthritis, etc. Wow. So now we know it's candida overgrowth. We now need to figure out, well, what's caused the candida? Let's talk about your lifestyle, etc. I said, so I do this high-pressure job and I play football 3 times a week. He said, that's cortisol. So you've never got an off switch, basically. And so I switched from football and moved to yoga and did meditation, etc. So I tried to slow stuff down, changed my diet, went completely paleo. Everything was whole foods. So typically that meant, in my case, which worked very well for me, was really sort of steamed vegetables and meats, very, 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 very clean, no processed food whatsoever. And the eczema got the symptoms of which disappeared after about 8 weeks. The leaky gut took a lot longer to heal, but it was, in terms of the thing that I was most conscious of, which was just being able to sleep and not have pain, it was about 8 weeks. Wow. And I dropped down from a 42 suit size to a 38, waist from 36 to 30, and I had more energy than I'd ever had before. Wow.
Quick break from the show. If you're a healthcare professional or a consultant and you want to build your online reputation and a personal brand so that you can get advisory roles, NED roles, or even if you're looking to position yourself as the authority in your field and you want to get speaking opportunities, then a personal brand is the way for you to go. We have a program called Digital Healthcare Leaders where we teach consultants and healthcare professionals exactly how to do this. So if you're interested, check us out on LinkedIn at Dasha Angelova or Martini Sue, or if you have any questions, feel free to shoot me an email at dasha@talkingpulse.com.
And what the consultants really love about the program is that we have digital healthcare leaders from all different types of verticals, gynecologists, dermatologists, oncologists, everybody is there so that we're able to help each other thrive in a really beautiful environment.
And Mark, so now you are founder and CEO of Vitaspan.
Yes.
What is Vitaspan and why did you start it?
So Vitaspan is a health technology company, which is a platform that does something which really, really frustrated me. It solves an issue that really frustrated me. So when I moved around the world, so I went from London to the Middle East and then to New York and back to London, by which time I'd had a family. And every time I made a move to a new country, I left a trail of medical information locked and trapped in different systems that I no longer had access to.
Right, as in your medical information.
My medical history, my medical records, scans, images, lab results, etc. And when I finally got back to the UK after 17 years of being away, and my son had been born, and with my wife as well, I just thought it was ridiculous that we've left everything behind and we don't have access to it. At best, I had it buried in a Hotmail account, but it wasn't usable by me. I couldn't do anything with it. It was just dormant in this storage system, not secure. So that was always sort of percolating. I thought, okay, we've got to do something, about this. The other big motivations were, in 2015, my father-in-law, very regrettably, he died of a heart attack, and it was the day before he was due to see us in New York, so he was going to fly, and tragically passed. And we had no warning. There was no signals. There was no warning around this, and the ramifications of that from my wife and me as well, the entire family, was so severe, and it took about 5 years to sort of get over that shock, because we were asking questions like, how could this happen? Yeah. Were there any signals? What could we have done? So that was always sort of playing in my mind. And then in last year, in August, I lost my mother-in-law, and she died of cancer. And that was a direct result of her specialist not having access to her medical records. So she went to the GP, excuse me, she went to the GP complaining of forgetfulness, and they thought it was sort of early onset dementia. So she went off for lots of testing, CAT scans, MRI, blood work, etc. The specialist who was going to review that data wasn't available for about 20 weeks, so she had to wait. And when she went to see the specialist, the first question he said is, "Can I see your medical records?" To which she replied, "Well, I thought you've been sent all of that information." And he apologised profusely, but didn't have it. And so that appointment was wasted. She's back at the queue, and then eventually when she was seen with her full record to analyse it, it was too late. And actually that experience had now determined or manifested and diagnosed the fact that it wasn't early onset dementia, it was indeed cancer. So it was a direct result of delays in medical records that her diagnosis didn't happen quickly enough, and she didn't get the treatment she needed, and unfortunately she passed away. And so all of these things were sort of really percolating, but it didn't give me the motivation necessarily to go and do it immediately, other than my mother-in-law passing. And I'll just explain the timeline as to why. It was back to that neurodiagnostics company that I worked for, where I had, after 6 months, been told that I was going to be promoted to the CEO because of the results that I'd produced. In the 2 years that I was there, I doubled the revenue, got the margin to 70%, launched our SaaS business, did a JV in the Middle East, 7 quarters of revenue growth. So everything was going exceptionally well. But aside from one thing, which was I was then asked to leave, which came to a huge shock to me. And the reason that I was asked to leave was that I wouldn't mandate the COVID vaccine on my staff. And the owner of the company, the one that had employed me, and said, "Look, we'll give you the pathway to the CEO." He said, "Look, you need to do this. You need to take it, and you need to mandate it on all of your staff." And I was at the view that, look, I've gone through this healing journey to basically get rid of eczema, which was an autoimmune inflammation issue. I don't know what it will entail for me. And if I don't know what it would entail for me taking a medical procedure, which I don't know enough about, I cannot force it onto anybody else. I've got people who are taking sort of cancer treatment and IVF, so I can't mandate it. But we had a philosophical disagreement over that point, and I left the company. So that, by which time I'd moved back to the UK, was operating here. That was really the motivation for me to launch my own company, because I felt that, look, if I'm going to put all of my energy into something and turn something around or build something from scratch, I've got to do it safe in the knowledge that a philosophical difference is not going to destroy the business. Yeah. And that was the real sort of motivation to to start something. And then it was, okay, well, what's frustrated me? What are the issues have been? And it was back to this sort of medical record fragmentation issue that impacted me, impacted my family. So really what we're doing at Vitaspan, to put it very, very simply, is we are securing your medical records. So if I make an analogy, so if you drive and you take your car to the garage, when that car is looked at, they plug something in and they have a diagnosis of it, and all of the full service history of that car is immediately accessible. So every oil change, tyre rotations, tyre changes, absolutely everything is known about that car. Yeah. And it's ridiculous in this day and age that the same is not true for an individual, because dependent upon where that individual goes will determine what information is known about that person. So simply what we're doing is bringing all of that data together, public, private, international, domestic. We create something called a one living health record that is constantly updated. And then, if you like, that, using the car analogy, that allows you to look out of the rearview mirror. So you can see behind the history, you can see everything that happened in the past. What we wanted to do is put sat-nav in the car. And to put sat-nav in, you've got to give people a sense of where they're headed. And so aside from just securing that data and creating a platform that ensures that it's protected and governed properly, we then extract elements of that medical information and turn it into a common data model. So we normalize, curate, and structure that data. And we do that for a really good reason. One is that the patient can now see that data in context and see it visually so they can do something with it and use it appropriately. Two, we ensure that the doctor looking after that patient can make sense of that information and can do their job more effectively. And three is that we use elements of that data to power predictive algorithms that give you a view of things like cardiovascular disease, 10-year prediction with a 93% accuracy as to whether you're high, low, or high, medium, or low risk of actually that manifesting. And what I'm extraordinarily passionate about is if I give you a sense of where you're headed and give you enough time to do something about it, you can make the appropriate lifestyle changes to reduce that risk. Rather than if you're sort of adversely impacted by the symptom, you'll probably be on medication immediately. And we want to create a world where we're really looking holistically at the individual. So giving you early warning signals for things like cardiovascular disease, diabetes, liver fibrosis, but doing it in consort with a medical professional. So we're not a wellness app. We're basically a clinical app that you as the patient also have access to, and you have ownership and agency and sovereignty over your complete medical information, which means that you can go anywhere in the world and share any part of your data with anyone that you see fit for a period of time that you determine is appropriate. So an example would be, let's say you went to see the chiropractor. Well, A, we don't think you should email your x-ray to them because it's not secure. And B, we don't think that they should have access to that forever because they don't need it. So much rather send it through our platform. The chiropractor will get a link. They can view that data and you can determine that they can see it for 30 minutes or an hour or a day to prepare for your visit. They then see you. They then write some notes about that visit and they can send it via the same secure link that we sent them. They can send it back and your medical record now is expanded with the consultation from your chiropractor added to that. And now whoever sees your record, which you permission in the future, has got everything. And so we're, if you like, we're the infrastructure, the plumbing that brings together all of these disparate facilities, labs, etc., and allows somebody to get a full 360 holistic view on the patient, to treat them as a human being, looking at all the conditions. So it's, yeah, I guess it's supportive of functional medicine, holistic medicine, basically.
And so what stage are you at the moment? How are you getting patient data at the moment?
So there are three ways for the data to come into the platform. One is through APIs. So we are a B2B solution at present. At some point in the future, we may go B2C and allow patients to directly sign up, but at present, it's B2B. So we sell the solution to a private clinic. The private clinic, in the deployment, we upload all of that data for all of the patients that they have. We then go to the patients and say, do you give us consent to collect your medical data? We then go to the NHS, and through an API, we bring that data in. So now that clinic has got not only the data that they have and they produced on that patient, they've now got the NHS records, and that's in the platform as well.
Yeah.
And then the other way is simply manually uploading data. So as a patient, when I have access, and I've done this myself, all of those emails in Hotmail with attachments, I've uploaded into the platform, and now that's useful, valuable, and can be interpreted and utilised effectively.
And how did you know when you were starting Vitaspan that this was an idea? Because obviously this had been built for you over several years, it sounds like. How did you know that it was an idea that was validated and that could work in the marketplace?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, ultimately, we know that if you want to look after someone, you've got to have all of the information. So there's sort of the core tenet, if you like, is if you've got a holistic view of a patient and you've got everything, you can make a joined up decision about their health. So we know that that's really, really appropriate. But the real sort of clue came from the fact that the NHS have been trying to do this for years. And the challenge that they had is sort of legacy systems and technical debt from lots of disparate systems, which creates complexity and lots of fragmented different sort of sites that they manage and look after. And also it's costly. It would cost the NHS a huge amount of money to bring these systems together to do it. And so our aspiration is actually to help the NHS to do this, but we want to deliver it in the private space first, because these institutions move more quickly, they're simpler to sell to, and then we'll go to the NHS to support them thereafter. My mum was a nurse for 43 years, so I've got an affinity with the NHS. And one of our advisors, Rob Shaw, used to be the ex-deputy CEO of NHS Digital, who was doing this or trying to do this for the NHS. And when he found out that why we're doing it, what drives myself and my co-founder to do this, what we're trying to accomplish, Rob was absolutely delighted to lend his support and involve himself in our project, which we're absolutely over the moon about.
And from a founder's perspective, what have been the biggest challenges that you've gone through since the start, since inception?
Broadly, because healthcare is regulated, regulation and compliance is difficult, but it's rightly difficult. You don't want to muck around and sort of play around in this space. We could have taken the decision to become a wellness solution, which would mean that we wouldn't need to go through all of the clinical processes. But what we didn't want to do is break the link between a trusted medical professional and a patient. So if you truly want to sort of cure something and treat something, our thought process is that working in consort with a medical professional is the best way to do that. And the only way that we could sell to a medical professional is to be clinically validated and go through those really difficult steps. But that means that it takes time, it's costly, and it takes effort to do these things appropriately and do them right. But that's the decision that we took. I mean, more broadly, I would say from an economic perspective, the market's very, very challenging at the moment. I think we broadly, and I don't think this is particularly controversial to say so, but I think we need a more support for early stage founders from a funding perspective. I think it's a very challenging market right now for early stage companies. So I think there's some work that could be done to support them.
And what do you think is the most difficult part right now for early stage founders, especially on the funding front?
That's typically the funders that were described as early stage are now wanting traction and growth. So they're typically wanting revenue. Whereas before you could find institutional investors that would sort of invest on ideas and good teams. Now they want, because their investors are demanding sort of bigger returns and more sure bets, they're sort of waiting for market adoption. So they're wanting revenue basically. And that didn't used to be the case.
And how have you overcome that? How have you kind of gotten through this hard phase?
Well, we've sort of bootstrapped, we've raised from friends and families, and we're securing our first customers. So we've got our first customer, we've got verbal commitment from another, we've got proposals out with others. So we've done it ourselves basically, which is, you know, is fine. Effectively, we've kept more of the company. What it tends to do is capital is the fuel that allows you to move more quickly. So it's just a trade-off.
And you speak on your values quite a lot. It's been kind of a common theme from start to finish. What are your values, and what are these values that you kind of stay close to no matter where you're working?
The values that are precious to me is that I want to sort of leave, it sounds a bit corny, but I want to leave the world a better place than when I began. And in order to do that, for me, it's all about an exchange with another human being. And, you know, there are system things that you can do. So there's technology that we're going to deploy, which is going to have an impact. But from a sort of a day-to-day perspective, everybody that I come into contact with, I genuinely want them to have a positive exchange of energy with me. I don't want to feel drained because of that experience, that conversation. I want them to be elevated by it. So that's sort of what really makes me tick. And I guess that then permeates through everything we do as a company, because if we're delivering a solution and a service, I want that engagement to be frictionless. I don't want to cause angst, issues, complications. I want it to be smooth. You know, as a startup, there's always going to be sort of, you know, bits, etc. But as a sort of a philosophy, it will be to smooth out any of those kinks and make that interaction frictionless. Because it's all about, everything's about energy at the end of the day.
And Mark, you've had so much experience in so many different sectors and so many different roles. Do you have, what would be your one piece of advice for somebody, and I know this is very generalized, but somebody maybe in their 20s entering a new role, maybe they're going to leadership, or an early stage founder. Do you have any overarching advice that has always kind of kept you going on the right path?
I sort of did it by accident, but if 50-year-old me was talking to 20-year-old me, what I would say is, when you think about your career, try and get as much experience as you can from different functions. So I don't regret joining a big corporate for 1 minute. It was an incredible journey. It allowed me to be entrepreneurial and do lots of things. And I learned a ton, but I learned it over a long period of time. I may have been a bit more strategic if 50-year-old me would say, hey, Mark, you know, mentor Mark had managed, you know, crazy Mark in his 20s. I would have said, look, why don't you spend time, you know, I was always in sales, like sales, leadership, etc. But why don't you go and spend some time with the accounts department? Go and sit with the CFO and figure out how they do their job. What pressures are they under? Who do they have to report to? How does their output work, etc. Now go and sit with the marketing team. I mean, sales and marketing are quite close, so I knew that part quite well. But every function in the corporation, go and make it your job to sit with them and shadow them and understand the intricacies of the role. Because if you do that, you get more experience, you get more understanding. I mean, the best thing would be, if you could, to go and work in those areas for a period of time and really get a solid understanding. But if you're sort of wired where you're much more sort of sales focused, I would still spend the time, the discipline of going to talk to the other departments that you don't engage with and truly understand what they do. And where that will help is, in effect, there's always friction when you're in sales because you think the internal organisation is preventing you from doing what you're doing and selling to X, Y, and Z. But if you understand that holistic view of every aspect of the company that allows you or helps you go out and sell something, and you're more cognizant of it, you can be more effective.
Yeah. Mark, thank you so much for coming on the show. I mean, your leadership style, even though I haven't personally encountered it, it sounds so inspiring and so motivational. And thank you so much for sharing all of your insights today.
Delighted, thank you.
Thank you for watching Good Morning Harley Street.
If you are a clinician looking to build your thought leadership, check us out on LinkedIn, Dash Angelova and Martini Sue. And if you're a clinic looking for support with your marketing or with your video assets or your sales assets, then check us out on the same platforms.